Chapter 8. Never Smile at a Crocodile. Omar woke during the night and heard what sounded like all the rain in the world falling on them in the dark. He barely dared to move. The rain sounded like a wild animal. The normal night sounds of the jungle, all those chirping and buzzing insects and squawks and shrieks from creatures he couldn't see, were gone. They couldn't compete with the roar of 1,000 tons of water falling every second onto every leaf and twig around him. He was still more or less dry on the bed frame, protected by the roof of leaves Bear had put over them. Bear had said there would be rain and it wouldn't last for long. He was right on both counts. As the sound began to slacken, Omar felt his eyes growing heavy again. By the time the rain had stopped, Omar was asleep again. The next morning, the jungle was full of steam. The background noise of birds and monkeys was back to normal, and Bear's water bottle was full to the brim with fresh rain water, and there was plenty left over in the bamboo pots to drink and wipe themselves clean of sweat and grime as they set off. Bear checked the cut on Omar's hand and changed the bandage. Then he retied the red and white bandana over it, and they picked up their sticks and off they went. Even though Omar was drenched in sweat, he also felt pretty good. To his surprise, he was getting used to walking in the jungle. A good night's sleep had helped his brain sort it all out. The thickness of the plants started to make sense. He could make out the shades and the shadows that showed their depth and the best way around them. He could sense when the ground was going to fall or rise, so he could head in the best direction. Now he was starting to see why Bear took the route he did, and he could see why they needed to take it steady, at jungle speed. I like that. What's that mean, at jungle speed? After a while, Omar could see that the canopy of leaves over to their right looked thinner. Is it lighter over there? Omar asked. The day before, he wouldn't have noticed. Leaves were just leaves back then, something that got in the way, but now he was getting used to the jungle. He could see that where he was looking was more light. There was more light getting through, and that meant that there was open space ahead. Bear smiled. It does. Let's check it out. A few minutes later, they stood on the bank of a river. It was about 50 metres wide, and the water was dark brown, like cold tea. A floating log showed how fast the river was flowing. It was going at a kind of speed that Omar could just about manage if he walked as fast as he could. I love this page, the way it's laid out. Do you like it? What makes it a bit different? Now, that's good news, Bear said. All rivers go somewhere. Where does this one go? Well, I don't know, but if we follow it, we'll get to a village or town eventually. Bear stood with his hands on his hips and stared across the water. His expression was thoughtful and maybe a bit worried. Is there a problem? Omar asked. It's much easier going on the far bank. Look. See how the riverbank extends out into the water all the way downstream? But this side is all dense jungle. Bear paused as if considering. I think it's going to be worth to attempt to cross the river and continue downstream from the other side. You good with that? Can you swim? Omar looked at the far bank. He had swum 50 metres at school, no problem, and he had a badge on his trunks. But he was about to say, "You bet, let's go," but then he noticed how Bear was taking it slow. "I guess we should be careful about crossing," he said instead. Bear nodded silently. Act in haste, repent at leisure, eh? What's that mean? It means if you rush in and make a bad decision, then you will have a long time to regret it. In other words, a bit of patience never hurt anyone. Let's watch, just for a while. For what? Omar asked. Well, let's see. These waters hide all sorts of dangers. They sat and watched the river. Soon a group of monkeys came down from the far bank. They had dark fur and their arms were longer than their bodies, and they chatted ooh, 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 and hooted amongst themselves and drank from the water. Just then, the water exploded suddenly in a cloud of white spray. Something dark and deadly moved within it. The monkeys screamed and screeched and fled, all except one. The monkey was caught in the jaws of a 3-metre-long reptile. Omar stared in horror. The monster's skin was knobbly and dark, the exact colour of the water. It slid back under the surface, still with the monkey in its mouth, and disappeared. Move back from the water, Omar, Bear said. No sudden movements. They walked backwards for a few metres. There was no more sign of the creature. That was one big crocodile, Omar exclaimed. Technically, it was one big black caiman. Bear didn't stop to look around. They're native to this part of the world, closely related to crocs and alligators. They're river animals, designed to blend in. They can hold their breath for up to 45 minutes and swim without a ripple. So now you see why we waited. He paused. Remember, instinct is the inner voice that you should trust. Okay, we won't cross here. Let's fight smart and stick to battles that we can win. They trekked together along the riverbank, keeping a few metres back from the water. If the vegetation by the river grew too thick, then Bear pulled back even further. You've seen how well they can hide, he said. A nice thick clump of bushes is all they need. Caimans have an attack zone of a couple of metres on land. If we stay further away than that, we're probably safe. What about in the water, Omar asked. In the water, they'll come for you. Whatever. As far as they're concerned, the water is theirs. So, we'll cross when we come to a nice straight bit, where we can see as far along the river as we can in both directions. They both followed the river until they got to a place where Bear felt it would be safest to cross. The river was about 20 metres wide, so both of them kept their eyes well peeled for anything long and scaly as Bear got closer to the edge of the water. Keep an eye on the surface, he said, and he used his stick to hit the water several times. Omar ran his eyes back and forth along the river. Nothing popped up to see what the disturbance was, as far as Omar could tell. OK, Bear said, we'll wait 15 minutes and scan the water for bubbles. Those are the telltale mark that a caiman is below the surface. Then, if all is clear, we will cross. Shall we wait a little bit longer? Omar asked, with a worried expression. Patience is good, isn't it? Bear kept looking at the water. We have been patient, and now is the time to be brave. It's as good as it's going to get. Time to get ready. Bear stood up and started to use his stick to demonstrate how to cross. He stood so he was leaning on it with his legs apart. You don't know how deep the river gets or what the bottom will be like, and the current will always try to knock you over. So, use this as a third leg. Every time you move one foot, make sure your other foot and the stick are planted on the riverbed. Don't move your stick without both your feet being secure. Omar hadn't realised crossing the river would be such a challenge. He nodded nervously. There was a whole new set of rules to learn. And above all, Bear began. Omar finished for him. Don't hurry, take it steady. Bear grinned and nodded and led the way into the water. Apart from crossing the river, what is the most important lesson that Omar has learnt in this book so far, I wonder? And what part of the world are they in, I wonder? Where are Cayman?